people speak fluent English, fluent French. I mean, Bob spoke fluent music.
His kindness and his awareness, and also that ability of not giving up despite all the challenges he faced.
Bob was two people to me. He was Bob Belden, my friend we would walk on the street and hang with. Incredible wit, smart, funny, first-rate intelligence, knew a lot about classical music. We discussed these things all the time. The other Bob was Bob Belden, the consummate professional arranger, who in the studio was meticulous. He strove for excellence, and we got really great results, and it was a pleasure to work with him on every aspect and every project we did.
And what sometimes is not remembered about Bob was how great a player he was. He really played beautifully.
Bob as band leader. Bob was a great band leader in that he kind of seemed like he followed that kind of model of Miles, where he just really let people do their thing. He gave the musicians the freedom to be who they were, you know, and that was figuring that was their strongest suit.
He really knocked my socks off initially as an arranger. Arranging was just so imaginative and so clean and so innovative. The two Sunnyside albums by the Treasure Island Band, they were stunning, first of all, in the fact that they were picking lesser-known material by great composers, reinventing it, and playing it with this like 12-horn, 3-rhythm band, which came to be known as the Treasure Island Band, and it was just astonishing stuff.
I mean, he was in the band in high school, in the marching band. Now, you know, he only finished his sophomore year because he went off to college when he was 16. But he was a part of that scene, and he also was showing early signs of writing, of composing at that point, where he would like do little vignettes and write a little trio or a quartet, and he would take it in and show it to Mrs. McBride and say, "What do you think of this?" And she would say, "Oh, well, let's play it." So, you know, he had a lot of encouragement from a lot of different sources, but he clearly was steering himself toward jazz.
I think the idea of Bob Belden as a composer, which was a major part of him, has really not been recognized. I can point to Black Dahlia, which was a soundtrack in search of a movie, and to the soundtrack that he did for a movie that's not well known called 3 Days of Rain. That the soundtrack eventually came out on Sunnyside. It's extraordinary compositions. His composing informed his arranging, it informed his playing, it informed his thought process. And Bob Belden, the composer, is really the aspect of him that'll hopefully get rediscovered.
Interestingly, both he and I were taken by the Elroy novel. It was just something really dark and brooding and fatalistic about it. And Bob had read it at a time when he had really been in bad health. And he thought about his own mortality, and he thought about, you know, that whole idea about what it's like to be on the outside, like the Dahlia was.
Bob really looked at the Black Dahlia as a metaphor for what perhaps all of us go through at many times in our lives being artists. A lot of people go through very hard times. Bob certainly did. We've all experienced these times. And some people, of course, they haven't met the violent end that Elizabeth Short met, but people go through some pretty terrible things, and a lot of people end up leaving. So it was a big metaphor, especially in that period that Dick alluded to, where Bob was having health problems.
He eventually found a way to not only just make a living, but really enhance the jazz tradition by being in charge of so many of the Miles Davis releases, box sets and the re-releases and the liner notes, and just generally upgrading the whole literature to where it became available to us as listeners. And of course, it's very valuable stuff. Anything Miles did was valuable. And I do remember when I recorded with him telling me there was a vault full of outtakes and stuff like that. So Bob was responsible in a lot of ways for that.
In the early 90s, I convinced Sony Records to let me do a series of complete box sets of key points in Miles Davis's life. Bob got very involved in, just coaching me and helping me and guiding me. And so eventually I just said, why don't we do these together? And for me, it became a saving grace because my focus on Miles is very much limited to the 50s and 60s, and Bob knew no bounds. He was into Miles of the 70s, Miles of the 80s. He was into every era of Miles with a very deep understanding of what it was. And once we got into the electric era, Bob was really the guiding light, especially when we did the Jack Johnson box, which was very guitar-oriented. And he was amazing at going through this stuff and sussing what was worthwhile, and also identifying what came out in fragments to what was really on the master tapes. And so we worked very closely together, but for the electric stuff, he was really the rabbi.
Bob was very loyal guy, very loyal friend. He was always very generous. Much as he had his health issues and everything like that, he always seemed to just really remain excited and always positive.
Bob was one of the more generous people you could ever encounter. As a friend socially and as a friend in terms of music projects, you couldn't hope for anybody better. He was incredibly generous and always wanted the outcome to be the best for the music.
The non-profit group Search for Common Ground has arranged a U.S. jazz tour of Iran in the hope of building bridges between the two countries. It's made a cultural ambassador out of the Grammy Award-winning musician Bob Belden, who played his soprano saxophone with Iranian jazz performers across the country's capital, along with several other American musicians. And the Iranian-American filmmaker followed Belden and other jazz musicians on the historic trip and captured the warm welcome they received at Iran's biggest international music festival.
I wanted to go there. I have a lot of connections that go beyond the jazz world, that could put me in a position where I could actually get there. And I used them, and I got there. That was some of the most heartfelt reactions I've ever experienced in my life. They were not there to coddle us. They were there to see if we just played our hearts out. And we did not hold back at all. I mean, I went out, the first thing I did is I just went and played. I figured the first thing that they need to hear is a soprano saxophone playing the blues and then slipping that into the Persian thing. And then from that, it slipped into our tune, and it's like this little melody phrase, with chords, and then bop, bop, boom, just unrelenting, and it never stopped. We never said, "Oh, geez, we should like play a smooth jazz kind of tune." No, they reacted to the more aggressive kind of sound we had, so we gave it more and more.
He was among the most productive people I know. Let's not forget that he was an improvising musician, that he was a composer, that he was an arranger, and that he willed an amazing amount of projects into existence against all economic odds, against all common sense.
He was incredibly generous with his time, just sitting down and talking to students. I sat many times in his apartment on West 87th Street and listened to him talk lengthy conversations. And of course I was only hearing one side of those conversations to people that he didn't know, just strangers that called him that had a question about a Miles recording. or something that Freddie Hubbard said in a session, or, you know, and Bob was more than happy to talk to anyone and everyone. Incredibly hard to believe that one person could know so much about so many things and accomplish so many things. It was just incredible. He was like an apparition, a cosmic force that joined this world of people for, unfortunately, a short time.
So this note was a plan, if you will, that said, here's what I want to do with the Alliance for Peace Building, with Search for Common Ground, with the UN, bilateral agreements among countries, and I'd like to talk to you about it when you get back. Well, I sent him a note after I received an email from my friends who were at the conference, who said that Bob did an amazing job, that he was really well received, and that they were excited to move forward with him. So I sent him another note to say how proud I was of what he had accomplished and where the possibilities were. Like we all do, I just really miss him. And his spirit's still there, but I still really miss him.